Hello and a very warm welcome to Wednesday Wandering with me, Cate Field. Wondering about stuff and not just wandering off. Although, this is your weekly invitation to step gently into reflection, to walk a little more slowly and to wonder more deeply. Today is Wednesday the 30th of July and the theme I've been walking with quite literally is this: footsteps on the dusty road. It's a phrase that's been buzzing around my head and it holds the weight of journey, of time, of seeking, of weariness, yes, but also of presence. There's something about walking, the act of placing one foot in front of the other, that allows our thoughts to loosen, allows our emotions to settle down, and our prayers to surface. Today I want to reflect on pilgrimage, both the outward and the inward kind. The journeys we take on foot, the roads we walk in spirit, and how, whether we're in our walking boots or our imagination, we may come to find clarity, grace, and even God along the way. One woman whose footsteps echo across both time and terrain is Freya Stark. She was born in 1893 to unconventional artistic parents. Stark spent much of her childhood between Italy and England. She had a life shaped by early instability, of illness, and a profound sense of in-betweenness. And perhaps it was this dislocation that first gave her the instinct to travel, not just to move through the world, but to seek meaning in it. She learned Arabic and Persian as a young woman, often teaching herself while recovering from illness. And she began travelling alone to the Middle East in the 1920s and 30s, in an era when women rarely travelled. Can you imagine this? She was unaccompanied and in this remote and politically sensitive region. But Stark wasn't reckless. She was just curious. She was deliberate and resolutely independent. She wasn't chasing fame or spectacle, but something much more contemplative, a way of engaging with people and place on their own terms. Her journeys took her to Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and beyond, and she travelled by mule, by foot, and by truck, mapping previously uncharted areas and sometimes encountering considerable danger. She is really quite extraordinary, but what shines through her work is not the danger, but the delicacy of observation. She wrote more than 20 books, travelogues, essays and letters in a style that is precise, wry, poetic and steeped in attention. She often described the details of she described the details that other people overlooked. The way the village dog might bark at dusk, the colour of the sun on a wall, or the social rituals of women in places often invisible to male travellers. Her prose is never showy, but it lingers. It has space, it's respectful, and it's wise. She once wrote, "There can be no happiness if the things we believe in are different from the things we do." Stark believed in integrity, in solitude, in the value of being a thoughtful outsider. She never married and she kept her own company fiercely and joyfully. In later life, she remained deeply engaged in her writing, in her reflections, in gardening, and in her reading. And what I think makes her so compelling is that she walked not for conquest, but for connection. She saw travel not as an escape, but as an expansion, a way of enlarging both understanding and soul. And she reminds us gently that even if we don't cross deserts or scale mountains, we can still approach life with the same kind of attentiveness. We can still walk as pilgrims. Another traveller whose footsteps leave a lasting impression on me is Christina Dodwell, explorer, writer, and one of the most quietly determined women I have ever read about. She was born in 1950, and she might easily have followed a much more conventional path. But it was a chance journey in Africa that changed the course of her life. After what began as a brief holiday in Nigeria, she found herself stranded, and instead of returning home, she simply kept going. And what followed was a life of travel that reads like some kind of myth or legend. She journeyed thousands of miles across Africa, often on foot or horseback, sometimes by canoe and sometimes by camel. And she travelled alone or with minimal companionship, relying on instinct, on kindness and her own resourcefulness. Dodwell explored Madagascar by horse. She travelled the length of the Congo River in a canoe, and she lived among remote communities where few Westerners, let alone women, had ventured. She later travelled across Papua New Guinea, China and Siberia, always with this sense of openness rather than conquest. And unlike many male explorers of her generation, she rarely travelled with a large team or elaborate plans. There's a humility in her approach, a kind of willing vulnerability in a way. She didn't seek to master the landscape or to conquer it, but to learn from it and from the people that she met along the way. Over the years, she's written more than 6 or 7 books. Can't quite remember, I will check that. And she created several documentaries, but her writing, though vivid, is never self-aggrandising. There's something quite matter-of-fact in the way she describes quite extraordinary experiences. It's a tone that kind of says, this happened, I noticed it, and I'm grateful. And I love that. What I admire so much in her is not just her physical bravery, because she does things that I would never be able to do. I mean, it's quite extraordinary and considerable, but it's her emotional steadiness that she carries with her as an internal compass. Not always clear in direction, but really steady in her commitment to keep going, to walk on. Dodwell's life reminds us that pilgrimage doesn't always look spiritual on the surface. It might involve a canoe and a snowmobile or the back of a small Mongolian pony, perhaps. But underneath, it's the same movement, a journey of listening, of watching, of learning, of letting yourself be reshaped by the experiences you have on the road. As July draws to a close, the liturgical calendar brings us to the feast day of St. Ignatius of Loyola on 31st of July, tomorrow. He was a man whose life and teachings continue to ripple quietly through the centuries. He was born in 1491 in the Basque region of Spain into a noble family, and as a young man he dreamed not of holiness, but of heroism, a life of chivalry and knighthood and worldly honour. But all of that changed when he was 30. He was wounded in battle. A cannonball shattered his leg, and with it his former identity. Ignatius's long convalescence became the crucible of transformation. As he lay in bed, restless and confined, he began to read. not romances or military victories, but books about Christ and the saints. And something shifted. He began to notice his inner life. He observed how some thoughts left him dry and distracted, and others stirred feelings of joy and peace and a sense of purpose. And it's this noticing that became the seed of discernment and the core of his spiritual teaching. Eventually, Ignatius gave up his former life and set out, quite literally, on foot as a pilgrim, and he walked to Montserrat and then to Manresa, where he lived in solitude and prayer. And it was there that he began to shape what would later become the spiritual exercises, which are a series of meditations, prayers and reflections designed to help people attune themselves to the presence of God, not just in church and not just in scripture, but in all things. And that's the phrase that still echoes today: to find God in all things. In the conversation that lifts your spirit, in the aching of your knees after a long walk, in the taste of ripe fruit or very good chocolate, or the voice of someone you love. In confusion, in clarity, in waiting. Ignatius didn't suggest this as a poetic ideal. He meant it as a practical path, a daily invitation to notice what draws us closer to life and what pulls us away. The Jesuit tradition that he founded continues this work today. It's rooted in education, service, and contemplative action. But at the heart of it all is a simple, luminous truth that God is already here. We need only begin to pay attention. Ignatius was in many ways both a mystic and a walker, someone who believed that the inner and outer journeys are inseparable. He walked through his own ruins, his longings, his missteps, and he didn't emerge as a perfect man, but as a more attuned one. And that, I think, is the deepest purpose of any pilgrimage, not to arrive somewhere spectacular, but to arrive more fully in ourselves, to walk until the noise quiets and the listening begins. As we wrap up today, I hope the stories of Freya, Christina and Ignatius have sparked something in you. Perhaps a quiet invitation to look a little closer at your own world. You don't need a passport or a grand expedition to begin your own pilgrimage. Sometimes it's simply a matter of noticing the light on a familiar street, the rhythm of your own breath, or the unexpected connection in an everyday conversation. So this week, I invite you to simply pay attention. Pay attention to what moves you, to what challenges you, to what brings you a quiet sense of wonder. What might you discover when you approach your ordinary day with the heart of a pilgrim? You might walk with a question in mind, or with someone you trust. Or you might walk with no agenda, just to breathe and look at the sky. Or you might want to sit and have that journey in your mind, or remembering a journey that you once made. What changed you? What did you leave behind? The point is not to arrive, it's to walk with presence. Whether you are setting out or circling back, may your footsteps be steady, and may the road, dusty and real and ordinary, become sacred beneath you. Until next week, walk gently and listen for that path beneath your feet. Take care. Bye-bye.